Our gospel reading for today is one of those post-Easter stories of Jesus showing up to his disciples after his resurrection and trying to convince them that he's not dead, which is a very bizarre predicament to be in if you really think about it. Imagine walking into a room and having your closest friends scream or faint once they see you. Imagine having to explain to them over and over again that you're not a ghost, you're not a zombie, you're not a demon, you're not a delusion, that you are in fact real, that it's really you. Now, if you remember, this isn't the first time that Jesus has appeared in public after his resurrection. He showed up to Mary Magdalene after she found his tomb empty. Then he showed up to the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, as Winnie had pointed out, the passage right before this one. Then he appeared to Peter, who ran and told the other disciples, and they can't believe it. They start talking amongst themselves, probably wondering if it's really true or not, when suddenly Jesus shows up in the flesh. He proves to them that it is really him. And then he commissions them to go forward and to bear witness to the world of this good news. Our sermon title for today, We Are Witnesses. At the end of our passage, after Jesus bestows his peace on his disciples, after he proves to them that he has truly risen, that he is alive, after he turns their doubt and disbelief into new hope, when the disciples finally realize that Jesus is back and there with them, in verse 48, Jesus tells them, "You are my witnesses of these things." You will be the ones who will leave this room, go out into the world, and tell everyone this good news. You will be the ones who will greet the doubt and disbelief in the world with this new hope, this new life, and this new beginning that Jesus came back from the dead to offer everyone. We are witnesses. More than anything, this is our calling as Christians. Not only are we to grow as followers of Jesus and witness in our own lives the love and grace of God, but we are also called to go forward, to tell, to invite, to share, and to show with the rest of the world this love of God. This love of God which we've experienced in our own lives. 3 weeks ago, we celebrated the good news that Christ has risen. Christ has risen indeed. And today, Jesus sends out his disciples. He sends us out to go into the world and tell everyone this good news, to share it through our words or our testimonies, to share it through our actions and how we choose to live our lives, so that others might come to witness God in their own lives. We are witnesses. And in our passage, there are two things that Jesus does when he bears witness to his disciples. Two things that I believe we can learn from as we bear witness to the world. The first is that he shows his friends his hands and his feet. This is a really strange detail that's easy to gloss over. And I think it's because we don't usually identify one another by our hands and our feet. If I'm trying to find a friend or a family member in a crowd, right, I scan for faces. I look at the smile or the hair or the eyes that I can recognize. I might notice a person by their height or build, even by the way that they walk sometimes, but by their hands and their feet. I've never done that before. And what's remarkable about this is that the first thing Jesus chooses to show his disciples are the scars on his hands and his feet. The very parts of his body that bear most the pain of his crucifixion, the pain of his defeat, the pain of his vulnerability, his hands and his feet. They're not perfect or manicured. His wounds are still fresh, raw, and gaping. Many people today struggle with the fact that Jesus came back to life with his body physically broken, because for them, it makes Jesus look weak and imperfect. And yet, it's his very wounds that Jesus chose to show his disciples as witness of his resurrection. Some years ago, I was in the process of doing CPE, which is Clinical Pastoral Education. It was basically a chaplain for a hospital in California. And I remember going in one day for an interview, and on the wall of the room was this painting of Jesus hanging from his cross, his face drawn in pain. And at the bottom of the painting read these words, "Only a suffering God can help. Only a suffering God can help." I remember that kind of stuck with me. I later found out that the line belongs to Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And supposedly a prison guard found a piece of paper with the line scribbled on it, and he smuggled it out of Bonhoeffer's cell shortly before his death. Only a suffering God can help. As I thought about this, I asked myself, what would it mean to bear witness as Jesus did with our scars? To invite others to our healing while we contribute to theirs. To see our pain not as weakness, but as witness. As witness of the compassion and strength that Christ has done in us, and then to use that as a source of healing for other people. How can we use the pain that Jesus has helped us overcome, the new beginning he offers, and the scars we bear as witness to the power and love God can work in our world? Henry Nouwen, the great contemplative theologian, called Jesus God's wounded healer. For him, Jesus is the one who suffered for us, understands all of our present suffering, journeys with us through our pain, and heals us to go forward as witnesses of his love to others. Which I think is really remarkable. Because if our scars and our past struggles testify to God's healing power, then we all have the ability to witness. Because we've all experienced pain. And in those moments of pain, we've all experienced the healing touch, the peaceful presence, and the empowering force of God that helped us overcome those moments. And now the challenge is, how can we use those experiences to help others? We've all dealt with something or overcame something in life that someone is dealing with right now. How can our testament be a witness of God's love for them? How can we be wounded healers for others while trusting in God's wounded healer? The second thing Jesus does in this week's gospel reading is as unlikely as the first. After presenting his hands and feet to his disciples, Jesus then asks his bewildered friends if they have anything to eat. They hand him a piece of broiled fish, and then he takes a seat around the table and he eats it in their presence. Such a simple act, but something shifts as a result of it. Something becomes possible that was impossible before. As Jesus eats, the disciples lose enough of their fear to draw close and to actually listen to what he's saying. And we're told that at that moment, Jesus opened their minds to understand. By the end of the encounter, they are no longer frightened, and they witness that it was really Jesus, that he has truly risen. Simply by expressing hunger, inviting hospitality, and accepting nourishment, Jesus turns table fellowship into communion. I'm a firm believer that something powerful happens when we give and receive hospitality around the table. Growing up in a Pacific Islander household, I witnessed at an early age the power of a shared table, a generous spread, and an open invitation. It didn't matter if the meal was fancy or simple. All that mattered was the willingness of guests and hosts to gather around a common table and share whatever was available. It didn't matter if we had a feast or if we were eating microwave dinners on plastic plates. It didn't matter. Eating together broke down barriers, eased awkwardness, and fostered relationships. Somehow, as long as the table was kept open and inviting, nourishment happened. As we learned during Holy Week this year, miraculous things happen when we meet together around the table with Jesus. So what would it look like in our lives today to witness around the table, to seek hospitality, and share invitations with one another as Jesus did with his disciples? As I was writing this portion of our message for today, I thought about how much I love eating by myself. As I've been told numerous times by my family members, I'm a very fast and messy eater. I got my elbows on the table. I'm the guy that talks with food in my mouth. My plate is like the size of 4 plates combined. So now you know why I don't like eating during coffee hour. But I really do not enjoy eating with other people. And one of my pet peeves is like when people choose their food, which I do myself. But when people chew, I just cannot sit there. But as I thought about all the reasons why I would rather eat alone, I felt the Spirit in this passage asking me, what if pushing past fear of the stranger, fear of not being a good cook, fear of my messy kitchen, fear of wasting time or money, fear of not having enough food? What if pushing past these fears is the best way to reveal Jesus to the world? What if practicing hospitality is practicing resurrection? When the disciples fed Jesus, he fed them in return. When they chose generosity over suspicion, their eyes were open. Death fled the room, and the resurrected Jesus came alive in them. Belief did not come first in our passage. Food did. 2 odd and yet very simple things Jesus did when witnessing to his disciples. How could we use and apply them in our lives as we witness to one another? May we be guided by the Spirit of God as we go forward as witnesses to God's love, God's justice, peace, grace, and goodness, now and forevermore. Amen.